I've had a blast with vampire crawlers, and early on, the game is very simple. If you can count to 3, you can probably win. But later on, the game gets pretty crazy. A single card can draw your entire deck, and if you don't permafreeze bosses, they might just one-shot you. And so now that I've spent more time in the endgame playing super broken stuff just for fun, and even tested things on a new save file to learn more about how the game worked, here are some things that I've learned about vampire crawlers that I really wish I knew sooner. You can learn from my mistakes so you don't end up doing the same. And so with that, let's get right into it. So first up, there's more to crawlers than simply the effects they give and the deck they start with. And this is especially important once you get to the later game. See, early on, I was just picking, I want Imelda because I want her EXP buffs. And yeah, that's a pretty good way to decide. Or I just default to using Pugnala Privola because in the early game, she's super OP. Then, roughly around Gallo Tower, you get the ability to invest into the crawler upgrade, meaning you can have more than one crawler. So all of a sudden, instead of just using Pugnala, now I'm using Pugnala, Poe, and Papia. Here's the thing though. Pugnala is my main crawler, and that matters. In some cases, that matters a lot, because the main crawler actually influences your stats. Right now, you'll see I have 75 max health, 130% might. Well, what if I set Poe to the main crawler? Still 75 health, but my might is down to 100%. That's right, Pugnala gives a bonus. Specifically, she increases hand size by 2 and might by 30%, whereas Poe increases hand size and area. Meanwhile, Papia gives max health, hand, area, and duration, which means of the 3, she might actually be the best choice here. And the reason this gets way more important later is because some of the late game crawlers give absolutely absurd bonuses. Let's take Gallo. He gives plus 30 max health, plus 1 mana, that's right. Much like Sur Clarice and yes, Arcaladana, you get a mana bonus for picking Gallo, but that's not all. You get a mount, duration, luck, greed, so more coins, and 10 reroll skips and banishes, which is super strong. This means if you are using Gallo in combination with your other crawlers, you probably want him to be the main one. This is even more important though if you use Missing No, the secret character that you unlock for beating death. If you want to know more about that, guide up in the card down below. But here's the thing, Missing No, insane starting deck, you get evolved weapons, and they have full sockets. You also get 97 max health, 1 recovery, probably don't need that, plus 8 hand size, 80 mana, which is absurd, it means you basically don't need mana cards and you can pretty much go infinite, 125 armor so enemies can't damage you, 80 might, 260 area, plus 2 amount, plus 8 magnet, so instead of just drawing 2 cards whenever a red card is played, functionally you're drawing 10 cards whenever a red card is played, 2% revival, which I feel like is a typo. I feel like that's supposed to be 2 full revivals, which would be 200%. Could be wrong about that. Luck, growth, greed, and some curse, which will make enemies harder, but hey, it doesn't really matter when your stats are this OP. And so yeah, pay attention to the stats offered by the crawler that you select, and when you can select multiple crawlers, make sure you have the right one as your main crawler. Second up, the cards offered to you when you level up depend on your level. That's right, from level 1 to 10, you're only going to be offered pretty common stuff, 0 and 1 cost cards. Now these are certainly a good baseline, but they're not exactly hard-hitting powerhouses that scale into the thousands right off the bat. This is why the bridge levels are so difficult, and also why Pugnala Privola is the perfect counter for this. And at first, I didn't quite understand this. I thought, I just need to get my luck up, then I'll be offered better cards, because higher luck equals rare cards. Turns out, no. I need to get my growth or my curse up, the 2 stats that actually scale EXP gain. Because the faster I can get to level 10, the faster I'm going to be offered the higher value cards. Now, once you get to level 10, you start to get better offers. Things like 2 cost cards. A lot of these can hit quite hard, especially if you go 0, 1, 2. And it opens up more deck building options, especially since the 2 cost tome has 2 sockets, which are great places for gems. Then, at level 20, you start to get the really good stuff. Things like the permanent wild cards, think Friendship Amulet. You can use the Friendship Amulet to continually maintain your combo and keep building it up, effectively allowing you to go infinite. So if you think about it this way, level 1 to 10, you're just starting out. You're a wee little baby. Levels 11 to 20, you're starting to get some of the good stuff, but you're probably not going to be feeling super OP. From level 20 and beyond, that's where you start to get those GGG combos. You're going infinite and you're feeling OP. So the faster you can get to level 20, especially once you've unlocked a lot of these really good cards, the better off you're going to be. Just keep in mind that while Curse can help you get to level 20 faster, it also does make the enemies more dangerous. So make sure you can survive until you level up. Now, if you've been enjoying the video so far, do be sure to get subscribed. I'm going to be making more in the future as I've been having a blast with vampire crawlers. Also, I cover a whole bunch of other games, some of which you might be interested in. Oh, and speaking of YouTube things, if you found any tips so far helpful, you are legally obligated to hit the like button. I know, all this algorithm stuff's a pain, but unfortunately it really does help. Third up, did you notice there are hidden cards? Because sure, early on, you start with a basic empty tome. Then you get a light tome, then you get a heavy tome, then you get an ancient tome. Well, you start with simple armor, then you get gold armor, then you get jeweled armor. These are examples of cards where the next level up costs +1 mana and has a greater effect. But there's a couple cards that are a little bit harder to get, such as the Eternal Heart, which is the upgraded form of the Hollow Heart. Now, just because you get an upgrade does not mean the Hollow Heart will stop appearing. The Hollow Heart still appears, but if you are level 10 plus, remember the previous tip, you can also get the Eternal Heart once you've unlocked it. And the way to get some of these is really obscure, or at the very least, not the most intuitive. I've seen a ton of people asking, how do I get this? In fact, that was one of the most commonly asked questions on my previous video. So I decided to dive into it and test a bunch of stuff, and I found out you get the Forever Heart by playing around 20 Hollow Hearts. Yeah, it is kind of just that simple. Here's the thing though. When I started a new file to do this, I noticed immediately why so many people miss this until they're pretty late game. First couple levels, you are offered Hollow Heart constantly. It's one of a few cards that you actually start with / unlock very early on. But maybe then you win a run, and you play a few cards, which unlocks a bunch of new stuff, which leads you to playing new cards in crawlers and unlocking more stuff. Pretty soon, by the time you've unlocked the library and the Teeny Bridge, you're not even thinking about the Hollow Heart, especially because it gets destroyed on use, so it's maybe not as much of a priority as something that's going to stick around in your deck. So even though all you have to do, play it roughly 20 times, I certainly deprioritized it a lot on my initial playthrough, and I bet a lot of other people did the same thing. So I wish I knew that prioritizing the Hollow Heart for a little bit would get me the really shiny cool thing. Because the Forever Heart is kind of like the Hollow Heart, except it gives 1 maximum health, scales with combo so it'll be more, and it doesn't destroy itself. You can play it over and over and over again, at least provided you have the 2 mana. So you can use this to get some pretty ridiculous health values, as you saw in my video on Killing Death. There's actually a couple that are even rarer. The Duplicator, upgraded version of a Duplicator, and the Crystal Crown, upgraded version of the Crown. Luckily, neither of these are a huge change to how the card functions, so they're not nearly as important to unlock. Also, I don't know how to unlock them yet. So, if you happen to know, especially if you have a 100% confirmed method, please do let me know down below. I've tried a couple things. So far, those have not resulted in me getting the cards. Next up, something that would have been helpful to know in the early game. A mount scales differently with different weapons. So let's use 3 weapons as an example. The Whip, which fires 1 projectile and deals AoE damage. The Magic Wand, which fires 1 projectile, and the Knife, which fires 5 projectiles. 1 amount equals 1 additional projectile. So on the Whip, it's double damage. This is very helpful for clearing waves of enemies, but not nearly as helpful on single target encounters like bosses. That's because, while yes, you are going from 1 projectile to 2, so 100% more damage, it doesn't hit very hard to begin with. Now, in the case of a wand, you go from 1 projectile to 2. On waves of enemies, you can now hit 2 targets. On bosses, this doubles your damage, meaning it scales incredibly well with a mount. Then you have the Knife. Because it starts with 5 projectiles, going from 5 projectiles to 6 isn't actually that big of a DPS increase. That isn't nothing, but it's not going to be as impactful as on the other cards. Though of course, because it's a multi-projectile attack, at a baseline without any amount, it is much better on single target as compared to something like the whip. And so once I figured that out, it became a lot easier both to decide what I was going to socket my damaging gems into, and also to decide if I wanted a mount with my deck, or if instead it was better to focus on other damaging stats like might and area. Because in some cases, it's just straight up better to focus on might and area, especially if I had a bunch of AoE weapons, like let's just say Soul Eater or Bloody Tear. Meanwhile, if I had something that did scale incredibly well with extra projectiles, say No Future or a Humble Magic Wand, then I was absolutely going to be prioritizing a duplicator as early as possible, and playing it as frequently as possible in the fight to get the maximum bonus. Though to note, a majority of the game's weapons do scale like the knife, where yes, they get something from a mount, but it's not quite as impactful nor as black and white as the pure AoE or the pure single target weapons. Next up, disarm effects, such as from the garlic, prevent enemies from attacking. This combined with knockback can really save you, especially if you're not exactly drawing enough damage to kill things every turn. And so early on, I use this a lot. But one thing that I wish I knew sooner, bosses, especially these scary deaths that you can spawn when you break your cards, have a 95% resistance to this effect. So you're probably going to think, oh, it's fine, I've got this, I can just disarm them, and then get clocked in the face and die. Maybe that's just me, I don't know. Either way, they have a resistance, but what they don't have a resistance to is freeze. And as it turns out, freeze works really interestingly. Not only when an enemy is frozen does it prevent them from acting. Freeze stacks are removed as they take damage. This is because freeze causes enemies to take increased damage. So even if you are not using freeze for the defense, you can certainly spend your mana, freeze a boss, then play another card, preferably one that is benefiting from combo, so think 4 cost, to capitalize on that freeze and deal additional damage to the enemy. Number 6, as you get towards the end of the game, managing card removal is really important. Okay, technically, the game does let you have a huge deck, draw that entire deck, and play whatever you want. The problem is, the game's UI really isn't made for that, and so you have 30 or 40 cards, it can be really hard to see what you're actually playing. So I found myself spending a whole lot of time mousing over stuff, and as runs that used to take like 30 or 40 minutes were stretching on well over an hour, it started to feel a little bit tedious. And so then I started aggressively removing cards from my deck or just not picking them up in the first place. And I wish I'd done that sooner because it is so much easier to manage a deck when you have like 10 to 15 cards as opposed to like 40 plus. Though you should get 40 plus at least once because there's an unlock tied to it. So how do you do this? Let's go into a little bit of a card removal deep dive. First thing you can do, the Banish power-up. This allows you to select a card and banish it. The reason this is the thing you should do first is use it to remove cards that you don't want to use in that run. I.e., maybe you don't have any use for garlic. You know you don't need to disarm anything, and it's not exactly going to do that much damage. So, banish it. That way, not only do you not add a card to your deck from that level up, but garlic will not be offered again for the rest of this run. I found that this is most effective on weapon cards, and least effective on things like mana, armor, and area cards, because there's a bunch of different versions of those. So even if I were to banish a mana tome, well, there's 3 other mana tomes. That said, if you banish the top end of like the area card, because you know you're not going to be spending 2 mana for some area, still totally fine. It does slim down the card pool. Another reason that banishing weapons, especially early on, is more impactful, remember, the pool of cards you get is much smaller from level 1 to level 10. So if you are banishing cards during that time, you are even more likely to be offered one of the things that you actually want due to the smaller pool. The next thing, which is especially easy if you have higher luck, take gems, because gems get socketed into your cards. Therefore, not only does your deck not grow bigger, but it makes all of the cards in your deck more powerful. This is especially the case after you start spending some of your gold at the blacksmith. Stick around for the next tip if you want to know more about gold and the blacksmith and all that. And so, even if a gem wasn't something that I was super excited for, like Let's say spicy damage, it's totally fine. It's not super exciting, but it's not bad. I would stick it into a card, specifically a card that I probably wasn't going to evolve and or didn't really need to worry about. This way, again, I don't add a card to my deck, and I'm getting a little bit of an extra bonus on top. The third option is to add cards like the Crown, Stone Mask, or Hollow Heart, which destroy themselves on use. Yes, this does add a card to your deck, but you simply play the card, and then it's gone. Plus, you'll get max health, you'll get growth, you'll get gold, all useful things that'll make your run feel better, or at the very least, in the case of gold, maybe make your next run feel better. Option 4 is the Skip power-up. This is similar to the Banish power-up, but it can be re-offered later. So in that regard, it's a little bit weaker. But hey, at least you'll get some EXP for your trouble towards your next level up. Now in terms of crawler choices, remember the main crawler modifies your stats, and both Gallo and Missing No have 10 extra banishes, 10 extra skips, 10 extra rerolls. So they are excellent choices if you're trying to keep a slim deck. In addition, having higher luck is good because you're more likely to be offered 4 different options. This means you are more likely to get a gem. Also, you're more likely to get the card that you want, rather than one that you're just taking because, well, you leveled up. So you have to take a gem. Combining all of this, the goal is not to take 0 cards. You need to add some cards to your deck. But the idea is to focus on the things that you really want and that actually benefit you, rather than being in a position where you have to take something simply because you leveled up and the game doesn't give you an option to skip it. Again, in the early game, not too big of a deal, but especially as you get extra growth and curse scaling, I found it started to become a problem, and when I started to focus on weeding up my deck, I had a much better gameplay experience. Tip number 7. How to farm gold, or more accurately, gold farming doesn't matter. Okay, I know. If you farm gold, you can spend more adding sockets to your cards, which gives you more power. You can get more power-ups. You can also modify gems more. All of these things are relevant. They do make you stronger. With them, you will win more. But the most powerful way to farm gold is to just beat the game without farming gold. Because after you do, you unlock the Oven Kilt relic, which allows you to overkill anything. That's right. If you combine this with a small deck that can go infinite, quite easy to set up if you have like Gallo, Pugnala, and one other character, all of a sudden you can get 5,000 gold, plus all the bonuses from Gallo's Greed, on every single enemy in every single encounter. You will not need to worry about farming gold anymore. So unless you are specifically struggling where you're losing over and over and you're like, I just don't have the stats for this, you should not actively go out of your way to farm gold until you've beaten the game, because the time spent farming the gold now is going to be way less efficient than the time spent after beating the game. But okay, maybe you're really stuck, you really just want a method to farm gold. The best way to do it? Get the Midas gem. Combine it with as many greed cards, greed power-ups, or if you have him, Gallo. This will give you a bunch of extra gold every time you play cards. In addition, maybe you've played enough to unlock the coin count. This gives you coin bags, which you might be able to put the fireproof gem on. The fireproof gem takes a card that would normally be destroyed, like a big coin bag, and means it's not destroyed. So you can just play that wild card over and over and over again. As long as you don't loop it so much in a turn that it actually breaks, you can replay it as much as you want and farm gold. Bonus points if you have another card with Midas in your hand, because that is just going to be getting you extra gold as you play all of your other cards. Try to remember to put the Midas gem on something that you don't actually want to play. Either something that's not particularly useful, so you can just let it sit in your hand, or something that is high cost. If you're lucky, you might even get a Retain gem for this. So now, the Midas will generate gold every time you play a card, and Retain will mean it sits in your hand rather than having to be redrawn next turn. If you want to turn all of this into damage, maybe to kill a boss you're struggling on, just toss in /fish for a coin count gem, because this deals damage based on your current coins. And if you get a bunch of coins, because you're farming them with Midas, you can easily hit for ridiculous numbers. Then again, once you get Oven Kilt, you can hit for even more ridiculous numbers. How ridiculous? There are clips on Reddit, which you can find, of people getting so much gold that their gold goes negative because of an integer overflow because they went over 2.1 billion. Which is also why I don't think farming gold is too much of a priority, because in the late game, you can get absolutely ridiculous stuff. And yes, Oven Kilt does stack with looping coin count and making all of those cards permanent. Alright, now for the rapid fire round. A few other quick things. The first of which is, there's actually 2 exit buttons. Now, I use the exit to village quite a bit. It's like, oh, well, I didn't quite mean to use that character, or I missed sequence and I want to try over. It's fine, I'll just exit real quick, and this abandons the dungeon. So, your run is not saved. You lose, game over, try another one. There's also the exit to menu, which I will admit for an embarrassing amount of time, I thought did the same thing. But no, the return to menu, if you click it, allows you to continue. That's right, you are right back in your run. Now next up, some of the stats in the game are pretty confusing, which is to say the game doesn't explain them at all. So here's a couple things I learned about said confusing stats. Luck, for example, it's a chance for 4 rewards. It also seems to affect cards that say RNG. So if a card has a chance for a thing to happen, and you have a lot of luck, it's more likely. If a gem's pretty rare, it seems like it's more likely if you have high luck. Also, I feel like I get more crits if I have high luck. But what does luck really do? Well, nobody knows, or at the very least, I can't find anyone who knows. If you know, please let me know down in the comments. Area, similarly confusing, but at least this one's a little bit more straightforward. So area implies it takes the damage and then lets you hit more things. Not quite how it works. Instead, think of this as a splash damage stat. So a portion of your main hit is dealt to everything. This includes your primary target, so yes, it's a single target damage increase. It's a relatively small portion of a main hit. My guess would be 5 to 10%. It's a little hard to tell because I'm pretty sure area damage does either scale differently for different skills or scales off of minor vis, just something in that formula that I'm not quite getting yet. But yeah, it's a small portion of the damage, it hits everything. It is a DPS buff, but other stats are probably going to yield you more until you have a bunch of them. Next up, I've seen a bunch of people reporting a bug, where they change the rarity of the evolution gem, lowering it all the way down to common, and then they don't get it anymore. What's going on here? Well, I suspect what's going on here is there's 2 types of chests in the game. The regular chest, which you come across throughout the level, and then the boss chest, which you get. That's right, from killing bosses. Oh, are you expecting me to say from regular enemies? No, of course it's from bosses. The boss chest skews towards rarer gems. So if you make the evolution gem a common, it won't show up in that chest. And if you have a bunch of other common gems, it's not particularly likely to show up in the regular chest either. Maybe this is straight up a bug, and it's just not spawning as commonly as it should. More likely, people are just diluting their pool. So my advice would be, unless you're willing to make a significant investment engineering most of your gem rarities, sealing a bunch of stuff, all that, maybe just leave evolution gem as it is, or skew it on the rare side so it still shows up in the boss chests. But then last but not least, remember to save your wildcards. Unless something says temporary on it, it persists for the rest of the entire dungeon. Meaning you can get a wildcard on the first floor, and save it for a difficult boss encounter on the 5th floor. These wildcards allow you to extend your combos, thus having bigger bonuses, aka you draw more cards, you get more mana, or you do more damage. And so those are the things that I wish I knew sooner about vampire crawlers. I learned all of them eventually. Some of them, I could have really used them at like hour 1 and 2, and I was instead learning it at like hour 5 and 6. Others didn't really become relevant until I got to the end game. And some of them, like the gold farming, you can't really know unless you look up a guide, watch a video, or, you just beat the game and find out, oh yeah, there's this really OP thing that gets you a ton of gold. That's it. I don't know everything. A good example of this, I still don't know 100% of the details about luck. I have some vague ideas. I feel decently confident about them. I don't know for sure. How do you get a crystal crown or duplicator? Again, I don't know. Really curious though. Seems to be a kind of cool mystery the entire community is working on together. That said, I think I'm coming to the end, or very close to the end, of my Vampire Crawlers journey. I've had fun with the game, I've done everything, now it's time to move on to something else. But I'm definitely going to be coming back to the game in the future, especially when they drop some DLC, which I suspect they're going to do because the game has been a massive success. So again, if any of that seems interesting to you, get subscribed. Also, if you're looking for more Vampire Crawlers content, and you want to learn more about the game, well, I've got a beginner's guide. It's focused on helping you get started, but some people have told me, hey, I've played the game for a while, I still found some helpful stuff. And if you are specifically looking for how to kill death, I've got a guide for that. On the other hand, if you want something on the lighter side, check out my crawler tier list. Yeah, some of them, very OP. That's why I say, don't take it too seriously. All of those will be up in the card and down below. For now, thank you very much for watching to the end. I'm glad you've enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.